Well, welcome back. This course is the class Doctrine of the Holy Spirit. And we are going to begin session number 3. Just again to remind everybody, in session 1, we looked at the person of the Holy Spirit in that He is a He and not an it. We looked at He does have personhood, and the characteristics of personhood are intelligence, emotion, and free will. He does have the characteristics of being a person, so He's a He and not an it. And then in session number 2, we looked at how the Holy Spirit moves in the world today, in our lives today. We looked at probably about 23 or 24 different ways that the Holy Spirit moves in our lives today. And now we're going to continue on, actually move into, for me, the fun part of this course, because we're going to be looking at locating the Holy Spirit in the Old Testament of the Bible. Just like we did with our class Old Testament survey, where we looked and we found Jesus in every book of the Bible. Now we're going to be finding the Holy Spirit. So for session 3, we're going to be looking at the Spirit in the Pentateuch. In other words, the Holy Spirit in Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, the Torah. We're going to be looking at the Holy Spirit in those first 5 books of the Bible. Now, some Christians seem to think that the Holy Spirit was a stranger in the Old Testament and to the Old Testament saint. However, in reality, the Spirit of God is much more quickly evident than even the second person of the Trinity, that being Jesus Christ, the Son of God. It's amazing that we find Jesus all over, but the Holy Spirit is actually right there in the Old Testament, even more prevalent than even Jesus Christ was. You got to look pretty hard to find Jesus in the Old Testament, but you could find the Holy Spirit actually pretty easy. And the Holy Spirit actually first occurs in the second verse of the Bible. He's already there in Genesis 1, verse 2, and is actively involved in the creation of the earth. And shortly thereafter, in Genesis chapter 6, the Holy Spirit is said to be involved with creation and specifically with men in striving with them due to their sin. Now, in the closing books of the Old Testament, the Holy Spirit is frequently mentioned, with the last clear reference being found in Malachi 2:15. So all throughout the Old Testament, as we're going to be looking at in these next couple of sessions, is you're going to see over and over and over. I think in sessions 1 and 2, we've already looked at over 120 verses that speak about the Holy Spirit. And now we're just going to continue to do it. And of course, as we said right from the beginning, the Bible is our guide. That's the only guidebook we have here, is where is the Holy Spirit in the Bible? That's what we're trying to find. So for this session, we are going to consider a number of the passages in which the Holy Spirit is mentioned within various sections of the Pentateuch, or from Genesis through Deuteronomy. Now let's begin by looking at the Holy Spirit at the creation of the earth. Now right away in the beginning of the Bible, we are introduced to the Spirit of God. Right away in Genesis 1, verses 1 and 2, it says, "In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth." Verse 2 says, "And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep." And here it is, the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. Now from this verse, we can see that the Spirit of God is associated with God's creative activity. Now it's interesting to note that the Bible ascribes all the works of God in an absolute sense to each member of the Trinity, both individually and collectively. In other words,